I'd like to welcome and introduce our panelists before we head into tonight's discussion. So seated next to me is Brandi Kellam, two-time Emmy award-winning investigative journalist and filmmaker who led the 2023 investigative series Uprooted. Next, we have Dwayne Johnson, a descendant and community member whose parents, James and Barbara Johnson, are featured in the film and still own one of the 5 remaining homes of the former Black community. We have Millicent Wilson, a descendant and community member whose parents, Lawrence and Fannie Brown, were longtime residents. She grew up in the community, and their home is also one of the last remaining in the area. And we have Audrey Perry Williams, local historian and president of the Hampton Roads branch of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH. So we'll start with you, Brandi. You led the investigation that created this project. How did you come to know this story, and how did you manage to get it made?
Okay. Okay. Yes. This one. So first of all, I am so blown away by everyone that turned out here today, and so thank you so much. This really, as you can tell, is a labor of love, as you can see in the film and the artwork that we have displayed here. And, it was an inspiration that really led me to really dive deep into this story. I'm going to be honest, I'm from this area, meaning like I'm from the 757 area. And I grew up here and never even knew that the community existed. I ran track in high school. Some of those track meets took place on Christopher Newport's campus, and at the time, that was about 20 years ago, so now I'm dating myself, but I never knew about the story, and so when I first read about this story, it was in like a paper that was a research paper, and it was like this one line in there, and then and I just got curious about that because I'm from here, but I'm like, oh, I never heard about this, and so fast forward, I started doing more digging. I learned that there were still residents still in the area. And that was pretty shocking for me because everything I had read about the history of this community, it seemed like there was nothing left, right? That this happened in the 1960s. It was done and over with, and all the people who lived in that community were long gone, in my mind, possibly no longer even living. So imagine my surprise when I knock on Mr. Johnson's door and I talk to Mrs. Johnson first, and, they graciously allow me into their homes, and I sit at their living room table, and he starts to pull out all of these photos, newspaper clippings, land records, like everything you could think of, like everything you've seen in that film and things that you see displayed in this room are just a small part of what he collected. And for me, that was so moving. Like, for me, I could see the pain and that he was experiencing as someone who saw his community just disappear around him, and there's literally nothing he could do about it. So the only thing he could do is take photos, right? Because, in his mind, this is going to be the only proof that I have that this community existed. And to me, I felt like that was just an injustice, right? And so I started looking for more resources to tell this story. I was living somewhere else at the time. I quit my job. I moved back here on a fellowship that allowed me to really focus on this story and do it justice. And so that's how I came about learning this history. It just was happenstance. And as a journalist, I feel like my job is to inform people, to help them understand history and how it relates to today. And I think this is one story that definitely does it. Yep.
We'll move to you next, Dwayne. You used to live on Shoe Lane, and we got to know your parents a little bit through the film. So for you, this film isn't only a story, it's a big part of your life. What does this history mean to you?
Well, first of all, for the longest time, it was, nice to be in a part of a community where I have friends. I mean, Millicent, my cousin Lita. I mean, all of us just grew up. We were a pact, and we all played together. Went to school together, you know. got on the got on the bus together, go to school. So to see it evaporate like that, is kind of disheartening. Um, but I do, looking back, miss, you know, that feeling of being in a community, a part of a community. Because if you look around today, I mean, how many communities where the neighbors actually know their next door neighbor? And I was in a neighborhood, I knew pretty much most of the people who lived on Shoe Lane, Morris Lane, and Prince True. Um, now that's gone. Even the church that was in the film, um, my great aunt, my father's sister, taught Sunday school there. And I actually went to some of those classes as well. Yeah. And another thing, I brought up my aunt too. I remember she had this green '63 Ford Galaxy, and that was kind of like the bus ticket for a lot of people in the community. Because I remember riding with her, and she pick up this person, we go to this place, pick up another person, she goes to this place. So she was kind of like the one who provided transportation, for folks, and actually she was one of the ones that actually along my parents that instilled in me the desire to travel. So when you look at that as far as being a black community, instilling these, the values of going out, seeing the world, but still having that base, yeah, that's sorely missed.
Millicent, your family is also deeply connected to this history and also to Dwayne's family. Could you tell us about that connection and what it means to you?
Is this on? Yes, it is. So, like Dwayne, we moved into the neighborhood when I was 2. I remember living downtown Newport News on Orchid Avenue, but I remember when my father was building the home, and so I've lived pretty much the majority of my life in that neighborhood, other than when I went away to school and I spent some years away in DC, but moving back here. Like Dwayne said, it genuinely was a community. I remember how you would go from one house to the next house and you just knock on the door and say, coming in, you just go on in. And the community was so close. I remember, yes, we went to school in the neighborhood, but Dwayne and I remember going to Hampton Institute, to lab school. And I was just going to say, Norma, I remember when going there, your mom used to take me to school, and that was in the first grade for me. And so when we talk community and we talk ties, to have a neighbor down the street pick you up in the morning at 4 years old and 5 years old and take you down to another school and spend the day and take care of you, your parents had to really trust the person that they were sending you away all day to go and spend the day with, to go to the school. And now moving forward, a lot of what happened, I was away, and so I really didn't know as much as I would have liked to have known. I did know that my father was the lead plaintiff in, going against the city. But I think many of you know, when you have parents and you're younger, there are a lot of things that happen and they just decide they're not going to tell you about it. And so it's like, oh no, I just didn't want to worry you, but you just think, I'm an adult. All you have to do is just let me know what was going on. And so there's a lot that I have learned, honestly, from Mr. Johnson and from Brandi's work. There's so much that I've learned. I've learned a lot working with Gail, because there's so much that took place that I just didn't know about. And so I appreciate the work that's been done and all that we've taken place here.
So Millicent is being real. You're being really humble right now about who your father was. So I'm gonna need you to tell these people in the room who your father was.
So my father, as you saw, was Lawrence Brown, and he was one of the first three black men to work at NASA. And when I tell you there's so much that you don't know, because I have a cousin that lives in Richmond, and I didn't know that about my father. And he happened to be riding the Amtrak from Richmond to DC or vice versa. And there was a gentleman that happened to be sitting next to him on the train. And he was, they were just having just general chit chat. And he said, well, where are you from? And so my cousin said, oh, I'm from Hampton, Virginia. And he's like, oh, who are your people? And he says, well, I have an uncle that worked at NASA. He says, wait a minute. If you have an uncle that works at NASA, there's only 3 black men that work at NASA, and you look like Larry Brown. And so I had no idea about any of those things. My father was, like you say about me, my father was extremely humble, just extremely humble. So you would not know anything about him. He was what they call today an aerospace engineer, but when I was growing up, and you always hear people say, well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to do such and such, only to find out my dad was a rocket scientist. It's like, really? So, yeah.
Turning to you, Audrey, we know that the Shoe Lane area community isn't isolated, and it never was. The Black families who currently live there and have lived in the community are part of a larger history of Black Hampton roads. Can you put the story of this community into a broader context for us?
Yes, and thank you for having me. I have been doing a lot of research. I did a lot of research on CNU, but I have a close contact because Millicent's mother was our teacher. We had several teachers, our principal, and I know what we had at the school. I know what they had in the community. But I have been doing more research. I love history, and my granddaughter said, don't nobody like history but you, granddaughter. I love it. I love it. And especially when we're talking about my people, because that is what is missing in our history books, in our homes, and in where else you go. But I talk everywhere I go. I tell people, if you don't want to hear it, don't come, because I'm going to tell you what I have to say. But I was doing more research, and I know about Mulberry Island, and another close contact was one of my mother's friends lived there. And then her father, they bought them out. Now, let me tell you this. Now, I don't know about money because I talked to his grandson, and evidently they must have given them more money, because when he moved down to Jefferson Park, he was able to get 6 lots. And he had each one of his children a lot to build a house. But still, they had no choice. When they came there, they took it and they went on. And Mulberry Island, was there. The Indians were there. The colonizers were there. Enslaved Africans were there. So when they took it, African Americans, they had a large community of African Americans, which is nothing new to us. And then I thought about Naval Weapons Station. That's another one. A lot of people don't know about that. And I first found out about that. See, I worked for all branches of the military, and I was working with the Coast Guard these 4 years, and I met a man who was from there. They came in 1918, gave them 1 month to leave, and one man they gave $25, and I haven't read anywhere else how much more they got, but they were forced to move. And they have a cemetery there that's still there. And there's over 70 families that are still there. And one of the things that they had an article in the paper, I think it was in 2022 or 2023, that they were trying to do something about the cemetery. Because back in the day when I first met this young man at the Coast Guard, he said they had to put in a reservation. They could go on the base to visit the cemetery, but they had to be escorted. They couldn't just drive on. So in I think it was 2022, I don't remember the year, but the news 10, Channel 10 was on it, and that they requested an appointment, and they wouldn't let them in there. But now that you have to give them a 60-day notice to go in there if you want to visit a grave. And they're trying to turn that site into a historical marker. But it's nothing new to us. We think about, as I was talking to Mr. Johnson earlier today, I was thinking about, when I think about us as people, I think about they did it because it was us. And then I tell you, my sister always tells me, but my mind comes up with everything. I was researching today, and all of a sudden, you know what I thought about? The 3/5 compromise in the Constitutional Convention. And I got that aha moment. Okay, all right. They only think of us as 3/5 of a person. So when they do those things to us, yeah, that's, hey, they not a person. They're only 3/5 of a human being. So they do those things because the atmosphere in this country has allowed that. And that's over in this area. I checked out over in Portsmouth. They had Sugar Hill. Now they took Sugar Hill but they didn't take all of it through eminent domain. But what they did, what was left, has been polluted. Now in 2022, they were talking about giving the land back, but who wants it? It's polluted, cancerous material. Everything is there, so that's Sugar Hill. Now I also found out about, now in Virginia Beach and Chesapeake, I couldn't find any areas that says eminent domain, but SeaTac community, they have polluted that. Still a black community. They're doing that. Then I think about Norfolk, ODU. We educating people, but we don't care how they live. We don't care how they live. So we take that too. I didn't find anything in Chesapeake with eminent domain, but still, they might not take it, but what do? They come in, they pollute it, and even though Lambert's Point, where ODU is still a black community, go and check it out. You're gonna find that they've got no trespassing signs. It's not a welcoming community. So this area, well, anywhere, and we just talk about the Tidewater area, but when I went out to California, everywhere, they do all of that. They take the land from our people. And that's because they don't, maybe I shouldn't say that. Well, I'm going to tell you, after this past election, one of our commentators said, this country was not built on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was built for white men, white privilege, because women couldn't vote to the 19th Amendment. So we know what this country is about. But I have to tell you that I look back over our history, and if you are not proud to be African American, there's something wrong with you. Because what our people endured, I am telling you, I look back, and if you don't know, read those slave narratives so you can get some ideas of how and what they endured. And they did that. I'll be 80 years old in November, okay? And all I can think back, I go back to my paternal great-great-grandmother, who I found on Ancestry was an enslaved person that had been left to this man's daughter. And I think about her, and I said, look at me, highly educated, but my mama told me I talk too much, okay? Very educated, but I love to talk. And I think we as a people, I mean, we know what's out there. You know, we can't sugarcoat it. It's not going to be sugarcoated, but know that we are survivors. We have survived over 400 years plus, and the battle might be strong. But let me tell you something. If you're a believer, know that God is always there. And if you get so you can't move, he's going to pick you up and carry you. So that's what I have to say, that we got, all I said, stay strong, be proud of who you are, and think about what we can do next.
And wrapping up tonight's panel, and before we turn to the audience, Brandi, I wonder if you could bring us up to date Since wrapping the film, what has happened and what's on the horizon?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So before I answer that, I also want to acknowledge that there are people in this room that also used to live in that community that I think should also be recognized. So I won't ask you to stand, but if you want to raise your hand just to show that you're here, so people in the room can see who's here. Um, so, so where are we now? I guess is the question, right? Well, first I want to piggyback off of something that Audrey just said, which is, in a nutshell, she said that, I mean, really, there's nothing new under the sun, right? Like, a lot of what we watched in this film and what we're talking about here on stage today is not new. We're talking about it today, unfortunately, for the first time about what happened to this community, right? In an authentic way. But this is not new. This is something that history has shown us that, when it comes to stories about topics like this, not a lot is known about that. For whatever reason that may be. I'm not going to get into that. But what I will say is that I also want to take time to thank Mr. Johnson for being resilient in that fight, right?
That's right.
He really showed me that you don't have to be the loudest person in the room in order to make a difference, right? He really sat there and he cataloged everything as documented proof of what happened to this community. And if it wasn't for him, we would not be able to tell this story the way we're telling it today. So I want to give him thanks for that. And to answer the question, I'm getting to it. As I was saying, history repeats itself. I've seen in my reporting this subject, specifically about this community, be discussed in all types of ways. But I think this is one that has told the story more authentically. And I think because of that, you're seeing movement happen in the state. There is, because of the reporting, I want to be clear, because of the way this story was reported, you're seeing a local group here in the city that's in partnership with the city council and the college address this issue in some way. There's also a state commission right now. So they're looking at this not just at one college, but across the state. They're looking at how colleges across the state, public universities, have displaced Black communities, and specifically, emphasis on Black communities. They're looking at how public universities have displaced Black communities. And so, we're about maybe a year or so into those different bodies looking into this. And so I honestly will say it yet remains to be seen what happens because of that. And I will leave it on this note, is that I just hope that history just does not repeat itself in this regard. Because it would be a shame for all of this work to be done, for it to just go right back under the rug again and no one know the history of this community in the way that they know it today.
Thank you to all of you for such a great, informative, and personal conversation tonight. So next we will switch to audience questions.
What is going to stop this eminent domain from taking the remaining 5 houses out there? And I knew that subdivision was back there years ago. I also know it's a huge white subdivision back there towards the water. So why did eminent domain stop right at the end of Johnson's subdivision? Why didn't it go further instead of coming up water? I think I know the answer. To that. You know the answer to that. I know the answer.
Well, I'll answer the eminent domain question. Because eminent domain is legal, okay? It doesn't mean that everyone whose property is taken by eminent domain gets their fair value for their property. In this case, the residents did not get their fair value in the 1960s. But there is nothing to stop at this day and age, in this stage, a university, any university in Virginia, let me be clear, from using eminent domain to forcibly acquire someone's home that lives nearby the university. There's nothing to stop that. Because it is a power of the state by the Constitution in order to do that. I think that was one of the things that came up in the reporting is there's no protection outside of someone saying, we're not going to take your house verbally. There's nothing to protect these families from that, right? There could be a commitment for that, but there really is no solid legal structure for that. So, you know, go ahead, you wanted to say something,
And
Ryan?
it's not legal. It's illegal, even though they say it's legal. That's a lie. It's stealing no way you look at it.
And the thing is, we all realize that they still have that card in their pocket if they want to play it. Again, eminent domain is a legal issue. And we talked about how they expanded it to allow colleges to take land. Well, the Supreme Court in the mid 2000s, I believe, expanded it even further. So even, you know, for redevelopment purposes, they can just take it. So
It just on a effect on that, there was that happening in the 2000s, and I think in 2012 they moved to individual states moved to try to provide some protections here and there. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if a university wants to take someone's home for a parking lot, they could.
I wanted to say something, if you don't mind. There was a panel discussion at Hampton University. I'm not sure if you, the lady in the back, was the moderator of that. Yes, you turned around looking like, who are you talking about? And she said something that really struck me. It wasn't just universities that was taking over our land, but the majority of the land used for highways and roads in this country was taken from our people. So we look at it as just the universities doing it, but there's nothing to stop them for deciding, I just want to take your land because I just want your land. There's nothing to stop that.
And let me say, and in Richmond, that's what they did. They set that highway that divided the neighborhood, and over with Sugar Hill, over in Portsmouth too. I mean, but like you said, it's
Okay, my question is, you said there's supposed to be a commission that was put together. There was a commission that was put together about 4 years ago that was supposed to study slavery and discrimination and all of that. And I believe Dolores McGuinn, Delegate McGuinn, she was the chair of that one, and she's the chair of this one. Now that the one I just mentioned, that started in 2020, and it ended in 2024, and we still don't have anything from them. Okay. And so what makes us believe, why are we to believe that this commission is going to be any more effective than the other one? And the other question is, where are all the black elected officials? Where's the black city council? Because they're the ones that can do something about this. Where are they? Well, come on up front, brother.
One just left. He just walked out the door.
Yes, we have maybe 2 more questions, and if the city council member does want to come up, I'm sure we could give him the mic. The mayor was also here representing, but I think he had to step out. Oh, hold on 1 second. I'm gonna get. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you? Oh, okay.
So I just want to thank everybody for coming, and we made history because this is the largest crowd. We have been the most affected. This is the port of embarkation and demarcation. So everything started here on West Avenue. It's an honor and a pleasure, and thank you, Ms. Rainey, for having us, right? An honor and a pleasure. This church that we're in, this is the Crown Saving Bank. It's history in this building. Don't walk past the cornerstones. Hey, Mr. Johnson, I see you. I've been to your art gallery in Hampton to make sure that the elders were in the building. I passed out and paid money to pass out 200 and some flyers. Nate family is in the building. The royal family is in the house. We here. We ain't never been nowhere. And the only problem that I have with the whole exhibit, y'all forgot the cemetery. My Aunt Dee Dee is buried in that cemetery. B2 Mama is buried in that cemetery. I went to the cemetery and they done put some markings out there. It's alarming. It looked like the cemetery in Hampton where the first documented black man is born in an Aberdeen project. And don't forget about Swantown. You can't have a historical Hilton without Swantown. What are we doing? I'm Angela Harris, and my cousin Benny McRae built the towers on 6th Street. What are we doing? And we still own the Smith Dairy Farm on the Colonial Parkway in Williamsburg. What are we doing? I'm the Harris, my mother the Williams, her mother the Hill, her mother the Thomas, her mother the Gray, and her mother the Brown. What are we doing? Where's my Charles City people? What are we doing? Hey, Lucy, thank you for coming. I love y'all. We still here.
We have time for maybe 2 more questions / comments. The young lady was first, and then I'm going to come to you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I would be remiss if I don't mention my family. My family, I come from the Wells. I am a Wells. If you heard of Wells Road, Wells Garden, First Baptist Church, Denby. There's a big stone out there that says Wells. I'm related to the Dotson family out of Mecklenburg, Virginia. My Wells family, where are they from? Mulberry Island. That's where they're from. And I will tell you right now, the house that I lived in, I brought my family in there too. 5 generations were on that piece of land. And my family had land across the street and on Prince Drew. So like I said, I gotta pay homage to my family. They are the Wells and the Dotson family.
Okay, let me see what time it is. Okay.
Good evening. This conversation we're having right now, I had in the 60s and the 70s. Nothing's changed. This is 2025. We're still having the same conversation. And the sister said, she asked the dominant question, what we gonna do? Our ancestors came here in 1619. They told us Jamestown. That was a lie. So stop believing whatever they say because they're liars.
That's right.
They're not going to do anything. When our ancestors came here, it was at Fort Monroe, which they called Point Comfort at the time. All of that coastline from Fort Monroe to Christmas Shores, that's where they came in at. Our people were dumped here, and the people that were living here, you don't even see them anymore. They've turned to ghosts because they were killed off. But we were worked to death. We built this place. I don't call myself, and no qualms with anybody else, I don't call myself any more an American. I refuse it. Because everything in America has always tried to kill the African in me. I grew up downtown Hampton where the city hall and the municipal buildings are. That was a thriving black community. We had our own banks, own supermarkets, restaurants, car dealerships, the teachers, the preachers, the doctors, the lawyers, the everyday people, and we didn't call it a community. It was a village. Because what she alluded to earlier, everybody took care of everybody. And until we start doing that today, nothing's gonna get done. So we'll come to, rallies, we'll come to forums, we'll sit here and we'll talk and we'll, bust each other up in the parking lots and stuff, but we don't make it. We'll tell our children even, vote. And my thing is, I'm not telling them to vote. I'm telling them to go to whoever our elected officials are, go knock on their door. The president of the United States and every elected official work for us. We pay their salary. So they shouldn't be called the boss. We are it. If we stop spending money, the economy would fall. So hit them where they put most of their interests at. America's God is their money. Stop spending.
I'm standing here. My name is Queen Estamara. and my grandmother, Roxana Mara Johnson, who lived on Warwick Boulevard, where the college is. And I feel some sort of way because not long ago I appeared at the Ferguson. And number one, the interviewer took my words and turned them around. Then there were some remarks made on social media about not coming to the concert. But I was pleased that I had a diverse audience and it was sold out. And I had in my heart something to say because I was not treated too nicely. The way they ran around and said I couldn't get in and all of that. And I was going to have something to say, but I thought about my grandma. And I thought what Roxana would have said. She was kind. She was sweet. And she would say things to you in a nice way, but she would let you know. And that's what I did. And I do hope and pray that we do come together, that we stand up and start speaking up. We have a city council. I don't know, I'm asking, what are we going to do? Are we just being quiet? We're living in terrible times. I worked and marched with Dr. Martin Luther King. And we did things, but there's nobody to stand up. We got to do it. The churches got to, from the pulpit to your congregation, start telling your people to stand up, speak up. That's all I got to say.
Okay, we have.
Stop looking for someone to lead us.
Yes.
Everybody, all of you, all of us, we're the leaders.
Yes. Okay, we have time. Oh, okay, there's lots of hands. We have time for maybe one more, but the councilman does want to say something. So, okay, I'm going to give it to.
Howdy, folks. Here's the thing. The power is in you. Half of y'all are related to each other, whether you know it or not. We are all related. If your family traced back to this general area, you're all related. So that's your power. And then you have these 5 people on this stage who have decided to tell your story. And they started with the Johnsons, yes. And I know all of us got stories in here because we all grew up on Prince Drew Road. I remember a lot of y'all out there in the middle when we had picnics on the 4th of July. I understand it's the best blackberry cobbler you ever want to taste. However, it is up to us to tell the man that walked out of here early, hey, we need to bring more people like Brandi Kellam. We need to bring more people like Dwayne. We need to bring more people like Millicent. We need to bring more people like Miss Perry Williams. We need to bring more people like the Parkers, the Taltons, the Careys, the Nazareths, the Beverages, the Royals, the Dodsons, the Diggs, the Wells. Because the Wells, keep in mind, we in the same family, baby girl. Right around the corner from you. Yeah. Why? Because we were family, and we were very prominent in Newport News. Why was Newport News only 4 miles? Because once you cross that line into Ward County, we were prominent. And we had all races living here together. If you go back to the 1880 census, you will find people from France right here next to us, living right next door to us. Also, Ms. Perry Williams, I understand when you're talking about the other places. Colonial Williamsburg, William and Mary, if you look at the letter, CNU used William and Mary first because CNU had its own plot of land. They were fine. So those things, what I'm trying to say to you is that we have many stories that we need to tell. And Newport News needs to reconcile with its own history.
That's right.
That's where our power is. And these people here, you have a voice. Miss Esther Queen, you are related to me, whether you know it or not. Yes, Miss Beautiful. I am Bertha Talton, her granddaughter. I am Mingo Parker's great-grandson, great-granddaughter. I am Moses Banks. I am Reverend Wright. I am all of these things running through my blood here, still in Newport News. And I help with Miss Brandi. She's a beautiful, beautiful lady, young lady, who has an interest and a desire to help you, to tell your story. But she has to start somewhere. And yes, the CNU, I'm sorry, folks, but you can only have as much power as somebody will allow you to have sometimes. And when you put people who are not sure of their own history, but know of some history, and you don't give them the tools to be able to learn the full history, you're going to end up with chaos. And like my friend, family member over here has already stated before, you've done this before. Time and time again. The difference is we have Miss Brandi Kellam to come with this film. And as someone has already stated, we have a show out here that's greater than, I'm from Denver, really. You know what I mean? So to come down here is a big thing for me, especially, it ain't that easy to get out the door, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, when it's empowered in you, when you live this, when you watched your family cry because CNU is taking up property.
Yes.
When I can't go to my grandma's house because the football field sits on it, there's a problem. And yes, I understand these things says the 19th century, the 20th century, but dare I teach you, we were there in the 1700s. This is long before. If you go to that plaque around the corner from Wells Road, where it was also the same situation of brothers who were trying to develop, but the city of Newport News blocked them and made them fight against each other, and then turned around and developed Wark Lawns as the first black neighborhood. There is something deeply rooted that is causing the city of Newport News to use things like eminent domain to take property from not just black people, not just Native American people, not just the Caucasian people, like the Campbellites, the Mennonites, who also is running through our family, the Yoders, the Smiths. They were white, but they did not believe in slavery. So they also believed in black people being able to own their own. And if you go up to Yorktown Road, which is another part of the black family, you will find the Campbellites plaque that's up there. So there are markers, just like on Tabbs Road, just like around the corner on 36, on 32nd. There are markers, but without explanations, without books, without films, without motivation, without stories, we are destined to repeat the same problem. One more thing. When Miss Brandi Kellam asked me, she asked me two things. One, by our family being displaced, which was gently pushing it, with CNU, how did that affect our family? My response was, how did it not? We have a whole city of people who don't know who they are. You got kids killing and fighting and shooting each other. And I'm going to a funeral knowing the person who's locked up and the person that's in the casket are cousins and they don't even know it. The village you talked about was the village of, if I see you walking down the street, you doing something you ain't supposed to be doing, I'm calling your mama and daddy before you even get home. So what Newport News is not understanding is by these people not knowing who they are is causing more crime for the city itself. The second thing is, how could the city of Christopher Newport, what could they do to the families to help the families? One of the major things that I would say is have a family reunion at CNU. We had a family reunion started in 1976 of 350 people from here. Part of the reason we had to take our tax dollars out of the city that we love and go somewhere else like Hampton or Williamsburg is because we lacked the facilities to be able to come together here, which was at Prince Drew Road. We would meet there. So since CNU took that from us, the least that they can do, the absolute least, is help us keep record of who we are. That might help. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, unfortunately with that, I'm sorry. Yes. I will allow the city council member to make a comment if you guys want to stay. 1 second.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Cleon Long. I'm on Newport News City Council. I actually represent the Central District where the CNU College is at. I'm also on that task force, and I'm glad Brandi did bring that up, that there is a task force that the president of CNU, the mayor, got together, as well as the trustee of the city council, said this would be a good idea to have a task force to talk about this issue, because we do not want to see this history repeat itself. I will say that we will be having a public forum. The date has not been set, but we're hoping that we have the same group of people come out because we want to hear from the community. This council really wants to move forward and bring together the community, because there is a history that we have to tell, and we need to move forward and make sure this history doesn't start over again. So be on the lookout for the public meeting that we'll be having, because we want to get the input from the citizens, from the families that live in Shoe Lane, and from other families that grew up in Newport News. I'm a native of Newport News. I remember hearing a story. I didn't live on Shoe Lane, but I knew people that lived on Shoe Lane. So it's really important for me that we get this right, and we're not going to rush to get something out just to say we got a conclusion. So we really want to make a difference in the city of Newport News. Thanks.
Before we wrap up, I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that this card right here that you picked up, if you didn't pick up, make sure you pick it up out the door before you leave. On the back, so this really explains what this exhibit is today, and it really walks you through the history of what happened to this community. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that on the front of the card and on the back, there's a QR code where if you're interested in learning more about how things develop from a reporting perspective, from an authentic storytelling perspective, you can scan the QR code. My email address is also on the back of this piece of paper at the very bottom, and you can feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Awesome. Can we just say thank you one more time to the panel for the film that was shown today. Let's give a round of applause. I knew I was coming into a church today. I didn't know I was going to get church today. I want to thank you all for that spirited reflection and realization that there's more we have to do. By signing up on our listserv, we'll be putting out information about what we can do at the General Assembly to try to change the housing landscape. We want to empower localities to do more work, and sometimes they can't do it because of the General Assembly's chokehold on their rights about abilities to do some work. And so we'll be thinking more about what our engagement will be after this. Like I said at the beginning, we've been more engaged in the Richmond area, and we're starting to understand what the needs are here. In the Richmond area, we understand that the communities that built the city are facing incredible pressures and are being displaced as the city changes quickly. And we're trying to think about where are there avenues of power so that localities can retain the communities that build those communities, and that the Black and brown communities aren't forced out because of other pressures. And so while we're doing that in the Richmond area, I want to understand what we can do here too. So I want to say thank you all for coming out today. Lastly, I'll say that we don't have partners at the federal government anymore, right? It's really unfortunate that they aren't the ones that are fighting for civil rights anymore. It's organizations like ours. So I want to say thank you all for coming out tonight. Again, if you know of discrimination taking place, let us know. We want to be involved. And so again, thank you so much.